There are 30 war fatalities who were born in 8 countries in Europe who are buried in graveyards in Ulster. Some of the bodies have been repatriated to their homelands, but most still lie at rest in the province. 4 were from the Great War and the remainder from the Second World War. 1 fatality was born in Sweden, 1 in Italy and 1 in Belgium. 3 were born in France and 3 were born in Norway. 6 were born in the Netherlands and 15 were Polish nationals. I will be dealing with the Great War fatalities first and then the Second World War fatalities in chronological order for each national group. I apologise from the outset for mangling the pronunciation of some of the names. I've included at the bottom of the screen references to 3 websites from which I have drawn information alongside my own research. In early 1917, 2 American shipping companies decided to challenge the German U-boat menace by sending unarmed merchant ships into the war zone to deliver provisions and machinery to Europe. The vessels were the SS Orleans and the SS Rochester. The SS Rochester was built at the Great Lakes Engineering Works in Michigan in 1912 and was called SS Jaguez until 1916. Her name was changed to Rochester when she was bought by the Kerr Steamship Company of New York. The Rochester, captained by Karl Erich Kokeritz, left New York on 10th February and made it safely to the estuary of the River Gironde on the western coast of France by early March. When the ship docked, there were up to 30,000 people waiting, and Kokeritz and the crew were hailed as heroes. For their courage, the crewmen were awarded a certificate, and Captain Kokeritz was awarded a specially commissioned silver medal by the President of France. On 2nd April, America declared war on Germany in response to the rising toll in sunken American merchant shipping and civilian casualties. In June, Kokeritz and the SS Rochester made another successful return journey to Europe. For the Rochester's 3rd trip, she had been converted to an armed merchant cruiser with a 3-inch gun on each of the fore and after decks, along with some machine guns amidships. On 2nd November 1917, on the return journey from Manchester to Baltimore, in ballast, SS Rochester was torpedoed and sunk by the German submarine U-95, 300 miles west of Tory Island. 23 lives were lost, but several men, including the ship's master, spent 5 days in an open lifeboat, with fresh water running out after 4 days. The survivors were picked up by a British vessel and taken to Londonderry, where they received treatment for exposure and frostbite at the city infirmary. The men were provided with accommodation at the Sailors' Rest, which was run by the British and Foreign Sailors Society, whilst Captain Karl Erich Kokeritz took a room at the City Hotel on Foyle Street, where he died of meningitis and pleurisy on 4th February 1918, aged 43. His funeral took place from the City Hotel to Derry City Cemetery 2 days later with full naval and military honours, and he was buried in a plot purchased by the US Consulate. The coffin was placed on a gun carriage and draped with the Stars and Stripes and the Union flag, and the band of the 3rd Battalion Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers, which was stationed at Ebrington Barracks in the city, led the cortege. A naval detachment and members of the Royal Irish Constabulary attended the funeral, and amongst those walking behind the gun carriage were the US Consul, the Swedish Consul, the President of the Sailors' Rest, and the owner of the City Hotel. Captain Kokeritz lay in an unmarked grave until a simple white cross was erected by the Friends of Derry City Cemetery in 2021. Karl Kokeritz was born on 18th May 1874 at Gavleborg in Sweden to Edvard Gustav Kokeritz and Sophia Salholm, and he had emigrated to the United States in 1894. Much of this information came from an article published in the Derry Journal on 5th November 1921 to coincide with the publication of a book by David Jenkin entitled Captain Kokeritz, an American Hero. In 1908, the Workman Clark shipyard in Belfast commenced the construction of a new ship, Yard Number 278, for the Orient Steam Navigation Company, and it was to be used on the UK to Australia route. Ship 278, named as SS Otranto, was launched on 27th March 1909, was completed on 20th July 1909, and made her maiden voyage on 1st October 1909. SS Otranto was requisitioned by the Admiralty on 4th August 1914 and was converted to become an armed merchant cruiser, being fitted with 8 4.7-inch guns. By 1918, she was being used as a troop ship. HMS Otranto, the flagship for convoy HX-50, departed New York on 25th September 1918 and accidentally collided with a French fishing schooner called La Cousine off Newfoundland 6 days later. Otranto stopped to rescue the 37 survivors. The convoy subsequently encountered a Force 11 gale in the North Channel, and HMS Otranto collided with HMS Kashmir, another liner converted into a troop ship, on the morning of 6th October. The best estimate of casualty toll from the disaster is a total of nearly 470 men dying, including 358 American Army personnel and 6 French fishermen. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission records 94 fatalities for HMS Otranto on 6th October, 49 from the Mercantile Marine Reserve, 35 Royal Naval personnel, and 10 men from the Royal Marine Light Infantry. Local newspapers reported that HMS Mounsey rescued 300 American troops, 266 of Otranto's crew, 1 YMCA morale officer, and 30 French fishermen. The survivors were brought to Belfast, but 3 of the French sailors succumbed to pneumonia at the Belfast Union Workhouse Infirmary and were buried in Milltown Roman Catholic Cemetery. Seaman Jean-Marie Bougier was staying at the Catholic Seamen's Institute in Dock Street before being admitted to the infirmary, and he died on the 11th of October 1918, aged 16. Seaman Guillaume Denier was also staying at the Catholic Seamen's Institute when he was admitted to the infirmary with influenza, and he died on 13th October 1918, aged 35. Seaman Louis-Francois Chalon was staying at the Belfast Sailors and Soldiers Services Club in Waring Street before being admitted to the infirmary with influenza, and he died on 21st October 1918, aged 17. The 3 men are all buried in the same grave, and Sir William Coates, the Lord Mayor of Belfast, unveiled a memorial at the plot in November 1921. The memorial took the form of a Celtic cross with carved panels and a dove of peace in the centre. The very detailed inscription names the men and their ages and the background to their deaths. The inscription records that this memorial has been erected by sympathetic Ulster Friends of France. At some stage over the intervening years, the memorial has been damaged, and all that remains is the base with the inscription and a portion of the shaft of the cross. Moving on to the Second World War, on 11th June 1945, Captain Raymond Dengus of the Belgian Army was riding a motorbike through Carrickfergus when he swerved to avoid a dog that had run into the road. He crashed into the wall of a blacksmith shop at Northgate and was taken to the 24th London General Hospital, which was based at Campbell College in Belfast. He died of his injuries later the same day at the age of 33 and is buried in Milltown Roman Catholic Cemetery following a Requiem Mass at St. Columkille's Roman Catholic Church at Ballyhackamore. The service was led by the Reverend Father Fitzgibbon, a British Army chaplain, and the celebrant was Reverend Joseph Sonneville, a Belgian Army chaplain from Ghent. Captain Dengus was survived by a wife and child living at Spa in Belgium. His burial plot is now marked with a CWGC memorial relating to 3 men from the Pioneer Corps who died during the German air raids and are buried elsewhere in the cemetery. It can be assumed that the body of Raymond Dengus was exhumed and repatriated to Belgium after the war. SS Stolvich has its own Facebook group, and the address is at the top there. This ship set sail from Sydney in Nova Scotia on 22nd November 1940 as part of convoy SC-13, carrying a cargo of steel and bound for Glasgow. During a fierce storm, she was wrecked off the rocks off Tory Island with the loss of 10 men. The Arranmore lifeboat conducted a rescue operation in terrible weather conditions, bringing the remaining 18 crewmen safely to Burtonport. 3 of the bodies recovered from the sea were buried in St Anne's Church of Ireland graveyard at Killult, Tulloch-O'Begley. In addition to the men's names, dates and places of birth and date of death, the plaque on each memorial bears the words "Gevallen in dienst van zijn Vaterland," which translates as "fallen in the service of his fatherland." Online translations render Vaterland as homeland. The bodies were exhumed on 9th October 2000 by the Netherlands War Graves Foundation and reinterred in the Nationaal Ereveld War Cemetery at Leunen in the Netherlands. The original memorials remain at the graveyard along with a plaque commemorating the repatriation of the bodies. Eric Hendrik Borgman was born on 29th July 1893 at Neuve Pekela in Groningen province to Jacob Klaas Borgman and Theresa Maria Bakker, and he married Martha Hulda Forster on 26 November 1919 in Rotterdam. He was a cook on the ship and was 43 years old. Johannes Bruin was born on 29th December 1900 at Maasluis in Zuid-Holland province to William Heerbruin and Gertrude Montenich. He was a stoker and was 39 years old. Antonius Adrianus Theodorus Hofkins was born on 12 May 1909 at Voorburg, also in Zuid-Holland province. He also was a stoker and he was 21 years old when he died. Cornelius Hofs was born on 19th November 1909 at Bentham in Duitsland to Adrianus Hofs and Alce de Geus, and he married Johanna Frederica van Doben on 15th June 1932 at Sexburen in Friesland. Lieutenant Commander Cornelius Hofs was serving with the Royal Netherlands Naval Aviation Service on HNL MS Kjörk Hides, formerly HMS Nonpareil. He died of self-inflicted gunshot wounds on board ship at sea on 15th July 1942, aged 33, and is buried in Londonderry City Cemetery. Fleet Air Arm 1847 Squadron was formed at the Royal Naval Air Station at Eglinton in February 1944 and was equipped with Grumman Hellcat aircraft. The squadron, which contained a number of men from the Royal Netherlands Naval Aviation Service, lost almost half its men to training incidents over a 3-month period in 1944. 3 Dutch airmen were buried in the graveyard at St. Canice Church of Ireland at Eglinton. Johannes Bloch was born on 14th November 1919 at Jakarta in the Dutch East Indies, and he was serving as a second lieutenant aviator with 1847 Squadron. On 27th March 1944, he died when his Grumman Hellcat aircraft crashed at Tully-Brisland near Eglinton following a collision with another Grumman Hellcat aircraft during formation flying. He was 24 years old and he was buried at Eglinton. After the war, his body was exhumed and reinterred in Nieuwe Oosterbegraafplaats Cemetery in Amsterdam. A memorial plaque in the Eglinton graveyard commemorates the exhumation. Eric Hendrik Den Hollander was born on 29 September 1922 at Bamberg in the Dutch East Indies to Hendrik Gerrit Den Hollander and Magdalena Brugman. Flying officer Eric Hendrik Den Hollander died at the age of 21 when his Grumman Hellcat crashed into a cornfield at Lochmagary near Ballymena on 28 April 1944, again during formation flying. The aircraft narrowly missed the farmhouse of the McCarroll family, and the Air Force recovery team found Eric's body in a field behind the house. He had been badly burned in the fatal incident, and his body was wrapped in his parachute and taken from the scene. The undercarriage landed 20 feet from the farmhouse, and it took several days for the Air Force personnel to dig out the deeply embedded wreckage and to clear the surrounding area. Hendrik Christian de Jager was born on 27 February 1918 at Tilburg in Noord-Brabant and was a second lieutenant aviator. He was 25 years old when he died when his Grumman Hellcat aircraft crashed into Lochfoyle after colliding with another Grumman Hellcat aircraft on 18th May 1944. The SS Arandora Star was built in 1927 as an ocean liner and refrigerated cargo ship, and she was converted into a cruise ship in 1929. She was owned by the Blue Star Line when she was requisitioned as a troop ship at the start of the Second World War. On 2nd July 1940, she set sail from Liverpool to transport Italian and German civilian internees and a small number of prisoners of war to Canada. There was also a complement of 200 British troops on board as guards. Excluding the crew, there were 1,400 people on board the ship when she was sunk by a German U-boat U-47 off the coast of Ireland, with the loss of 805 lives. Bodies were washed up along the western and northern coasts of Ireland, the western seaboard of Scotland, and as far as the Outer Hebrides. The body of Giuseppe Capella, an Italian civilian, was washed ashore at West Light on Rathlin Island on 10th August 1940 and was buried in the graveyard at St. Thomas Church of Ireland 2 days later. Giuseppe Capella was born on 13th April 1895, Borg Otaro, and he married Rosalina Lazzi. They were living at Calthorpe Street in the St. Pancras area of London with their son Arthur, who was 18, and Rosina's brother. Giuseppe was a hotel porter and waiter when he was interned and was 55 years old when he died. 3 Norwegian merchant seamen are buried in Belfast City Cemetery. You'll see that in each of the headstones says for Norge or for Norway, 1939-1945. John Janssen was born on 9th January 1912 and was a seaman on MV Helgory, which was part of convoy HX 159 when it was towed into Belfast Lock after an engine room explosion. He drowned at Dufferin Dock in Belfast on 13th December 1941, aged 29. His last known address was Haraldsgate in Haugesund, Norway, and he left a widow and 3 children. Carl Truvge Carlsen was born on 23rd October 1889 at Stavanger in Norway to Carl Johan Larsen and Trina Maria Carlsen, and he married Ragnar Rasmussen on 20th October 1917 in Stavanger. He was chief engineer on board SS Ishbourne when he drowned at Queen's Quay in Belfast on 20th December 1941, aged 52. Halvard Arneson Halgem was born on 26 February 1897 at Sonderled in Norway to Arne Halvardsson Halgem and Tora Lichtrang, and the family later lived at Vestre Aker in Oslo. He married Ingeborg Alvilda Christensen on 28th March 1923 at Gamla Aker in Oslo, and they had 1 child before the marriage was dissolved. Halvard Arneson Halgem was second mate on DS Hausmar vessel when he died in an onboard accident at Prince's Dock in Belfast on 6th December 1942, aged 45. 15 Polish airmen died in a variety of circumstances and are buried in 5 graveyards in Northern Ireland. 1 died in 1940, 3 in 1942, and 11 in 1943. A lot of the information from this section comes from Scott Edgar's Wartime NI website, and I'd like to point out that there is an active Polish society in Northern Ireland that is involved in shared history projects and has developed the Polish Wings Heritage Trail. The Society's Facebook page is called For Your Freedom and Ours. In this final segment of the talk, I will be using British rank terms, and again, apologies in advance for mispronunciation of names and places. Francis Josef Pretkovich was born on 9th July 1914 to Josef Pretkovich and Gertrude Pretkovich. He arrived in Northern Ireland on 11th October 1940 and was posted to 245 Squadron, which was stationed at RAF Aldergrove. He made a total of 4 operational sorties with the squadron before his untimely death. On 30th November 1940, Sergeant Pretkovich was flying a Hawker Hurricane in a training exercise when the aircraft's engine failed. Pretkovich bailed out of the stricken fighter plane, only for his parachute to become entangled in the tail. This caused the plane to spin out of control and come down on high ground near Cushendall. Francis Joseph Pretkovich was 26 years old and is buried in Glenaby Roman Catholic graveyard. In December 1984, a team of volunteers from the Ulster Aviation Society recovered the aircraft's Merlin engine. Joseph Antoni Pudelko was born on 13th December 1918 to Antoni and Katarina Pudelko. After escaping Poland, he served with the RAF's 309 Polish Squadron before being transferred to 6th Anti-Aircraft Cooperation Unit. Flight Sergeant Pudelko was the pilot of a Westland Lysander aircraft, which crashed shortly after takeoff from RAF Sydenham on 23 April 1942. Flight Sergeant Norman Elcock, Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, died in the same incident. Joseph Pudelko was 23 years old and is buried in Milltown Roman Catholic Cemetery in Belfast. His rank is recorded as KPL on the headstone, which is a contraction of Capral, or in English, corporal. Edward Lewandowski was born on 2nd September 1919 at Grodku in Russia and served as a corporal with 6th Anti-Aircraft Cooperation Unit. He died when a Westland Lysander aircraft from RAF Sydenham hit a balloon cable and crashed into Belfast Lough on 30th April 1942. Edvard Lewandowski was 22 years old and is buried in Milltown Roman Catholic Cemetery in Belfast. Henrik Komenda was born on 13th January 1920 at Silac and served as a corporal with 1480 Flight Anti-Aircraft Cooperation, which was flying with 256 Squadron and stationed at Newtonards Airfield. He died when a Boulton Paul Defiant aircraft crashed at Ballycarry on 9th July 1942. He was 22 years old and is buried in Movilla Cemetery in Newtonards. Air Gunner Peter Charles Hunter Phillips of the RAF died in the same incident. 315 Squadron, known as the City of Dublin Squadron, was equipped with Supermarine Spitfire aircraft and stationed at RAF Ballyhalbert when 4 pilots died in a 45-day period in the autumn of 1943. Jesia Richard Tukemski was born on 7th April 1919 at Warsaw and served as a second lieutenant with 315 Squadron. He died when his aircraft crashed near Ballymena on 22nd August 1943. He was 24 years old and is buried in Mount St. Joseph Roman Catholic Cemetery in Ballycranbeg on the Ards Peninsula. On 11 September, 3 Supermarine Spitfires took off from Ballyhalbert on a formation flying training exercise. They got separated in bad weather and each of the planes crashed, resulting in 2 fatalities. The fatalities were buried in Mount St. Joseph Roman Catholic Churchyard on 14 September following a high mass at Ballyhalbert Airfield. Stanislaw Grandowski was born on 11th April 1909 and was a warrant officer with 315 Squadron. He was a senior pilot on the formation flying training exercise. He was 34 years old when he died, and that occurred when he crashed his Spitfire aircraft on Plantation Road near Lisburn. Vladislav Kolek was born on 2nd July 1917 and was posted as a flight sergeant to 315 Squadron on 9 September 1943. 2 days later, at the age of 26, he was killed when he crashed his Spitfire aircraft at Ballyutoag Hill near Belfast whilst trying to reach Nuts Corner Airfield. Andrzej Henryk Fleisier was born on 21st December 1912 at Oconnew and was a sergeant with 315 Squadron. He died at the age of 30 when his Supermarine Spitfire aircraft crashed near Ballyhalbert Airfield during a training exercise on 5th October 1943. He was 30 years old and is buried in Movilla Cemetery in Newtonards. Vladislav Eugenius Heller was born on 27th June 1895 and served in the Great War with the Austrian Army. He was a wing commander with 3 Air Observers Navigation School and died when an Avro Anson aircraft from RAF Squiresgate near Blackpool crashed into Knocklade Mountain near Ballycastle during a navigational training exercise on 18th October 1943. He was 43 years old and is buried in Movilla Cemetery in Newtonards. In 1943, 304 Polish Squadron was stationed at RAF Predanach in Cornwall and was operating under Coastal Command. On 20th December 1943, One of the squadron's Vickers Wellington aircraft was returning from an anti-submarine patrol when it crashed at Mount Brandon in County Kerry during a snowstorm. The crew of 6 flight sergeants were all killed, and the recovered bodies were transported to the border by the Irish authorities on 22nd December. The 6 Polish airmen were buried in Milltown Roman Catholic Cemetery in Belfast on 27th December, with men from 303 Polish Squadron in Ballyhalbert acting as coffin bearers. Klemens Adamowicz was born on 25th April 1911 at Zamość, and he was the pilot. He was 32 years old when he died. Stanislaw Czerneski was born on 14th February 1918 at Potokal, and he was the co-pilot, and he was 27 years old when he died. Pavel Kovalevich was born on 9th February 1917 at Piaski Stair, and he was the wireless operator. He was 26 years old when he died. Kamirez Lugovsky was born on 20th July 1920, and he was an air gunner, 23 years old when he died. Vincenti Pietrzak was born on 25th July 1916, and he was an air gunner and 27 years old when he died. Naftali Hirsch Pavel Kuflik was born on 4th January 1923 at Cologne to Polish parents with German ancestry. Pavel Kuflik was the navigator on the flight and was 20 years old when he died. His body was exhumed from the grave in Milltown Cemetery and reinterred in Carnmoney Jewish Cemetery near Belfast on 21st June 1944. And that brings this talk about European war graves in Ulster to an end. Thank you.